The star charts made no sense anymore. Commander Adama stood on the bridge of the Battlestar Galactica, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the navigation console, as if physical force could make the impossible readings resolve into something comprehensible. Beyond the viewport, space itself had changed. The familiar constellations that had guided the colonial fleet for Yarans, distant, cold, indifferent, were gone. In their place hung formations he had never seen, arrangements of stellar matter that defied every astronomical record the 12 colonies had ever compiled. Sir, scanners are detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our database, Colonel Tai reported, his voice carrying the carefully controlled tension of a military officer refusing to acknowledge the fear beneath. Whatever that last jump took us through, we're not in colonial space anymore. We're not in any charted space. Adama said nothing. He didn't need to. The entire bridge crew could see it. A planet that dominated their forward view like a green jewel suspended in the cosmic void. It was impossible, beautiful, and according to every principle of astrophysics the colonials understood, it shouldn't exist. The world was Earth-sized, but it gleamed with an emerald luminescence that seemed to pulse with its own internal rhythm, as if the planet itself breathed with living light. Cylon pursuit? Adama asked, though he already suspected the answer. Negative, sir. No Cylon signatures on any scanner range. Whatever happened when we jumped? Tai paused, struggling with words for the impossible. I don't think the Cylons followed us here. I don't think they could follow us here. For the first time in yarns of running, fighting, and dying, the colonial fleet had escaped their mechanical executioners. But as Adama watched 3 points of green light detach from the Emerald Planet and begin accelerating toward his fleet with impossible speed. No engine burns, no thrust signatures, just pure movement defying every law of motion. He realized they had merely traded one impossible threat for another. The lights resolved into human shapes as they approached. Men, or beings shaped like men, flying through the hard vacuum of space without ships, without suits, surrounded by coronas of brilliant green energy that blazed like captive stars. They moved with purpose, with power, and with the unmistakable confidence of those who had never known defeat in the cosmic void. Battle stations, Adama ordered quietly. But hold fire. If they wanted us dead, I suspect we'd already be debris. The lead figure stopped precisely 100 metrons from the Galactica's hull, hovering in space as casually as a man might stand on solid ground. Through the viewport, Adama could see him clearly now. A human face, strong-jawed and determined, with brown hair and eyes that glowed the same impossible green as the energy that surrounded him. On his chest, a symbol blazed, a circle bisected by a straight line, simple and absolute. When the figure spoke, his voice came through every comm system on the Galactica simultaneously, as if the green light itself carried his words directly into their technology. Attention, unknown vessel. This is Hal Jordan of the Green Lantern Corps, Space Sector 2814. You have entered the sovereign space of Oa, home of the Guardians of the Universe and the Corps that serves them. Power down your weapon systems and prepare to be boarded for identification and threat assessment. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Adama felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. They had fled genocide, crossed impossible distances, lost entire worlds to the Cylons' merciless logic. And now, when they needed sanctuary most desperately, they faced beings who commanded power beyond anything in colonial experience, beings who spoke with the absolute authority of those who had never been challenged. On the scanner displays, more green lights were emerging from the planet. Dozens of them, hundreds. The entire bridge crew watched in silent awe as the Galactica and her fleet, humanity's last hope, the mightiest warship the 12 colonies had ever built, found itself surrounded by an army of living emeralds who treated the vacuum of space as their natural home. Apollo to bridge, his son's voice crackled over the comm. Father, I'm looking at scanner readings that can't be real. Are those people? Flying in space? Without ships? I see them, Apollo, Adama replied, his eyes never leaving the green-clad figure hovering before his bridge. And I suspect we're about to learn that everything we thought we knew about the universe was merely the first page of a much larger book. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, Hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. Commander Adama straightened his uniform, squared his shoulders, and opened a channel to the being who called himself a Green Lantern. Whatever came next, the colonial fleet would face it as they had faced everything since the fall of the colonies, with courage, with dignity, and with the unbreakable will to survive. This is Commander Adama of the Battlestar Galactica. We are refugees fleeing the destruction of our homeworlds. We mean no harm and seek only safe passage, but we will not surrender our weapons to unknown forces, no matter how impressive their display of power. If you wish to board my ship, you will do so as diplomats, not conquerors. The green light around Hal Jordan flared brighter, and for a moment Adama wondered if he had just condemned his people to annihilation. Then, impossibly, the man smiled. Gutsy? I like gutsy. Stand by, Commander. I'm bringing you in front of the Guardians. They're going to want to hear your story. Jordan's expression shifted, became more serious. Fair warning. They're not big on strangers showing up unannounced, and they're really not big on warships parking in their front yard. But something tells me you've got one hell of an explanation. As the green light began to envelop the Galactica herself, pulling the mighty Battlestar toward the Emerald Planet with gentle, inexorable force, Adama allowed himself one moment of hope. They had been running for so long, fighting for so long, that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to meet someone who didn't immediately try to exterminate them. Almost. The chamber of the Guardians defied human comprehension. Adama stood at the center of a circular platform that seemed to float in a void of pure green light, flanked by Apollo and Colonel Tai. Around them, the chamber expanded in impossible geometries, walls that curved inward and outward simultaneously, perspectives that hurt the eye when examined too closely. And everywhere, the pulsing emerald radiance that seemed to be both light and something far more fundamental. The Guardians themselves sat in a semicircle on thrones that rose from the luminous floor, 12 figures barely a meter tall, their blue skin and white robes giving them the appearance of ancient children. If children could possess eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies. Hal Jordan stood to one side, his ring hand held casually at his side. But Adama noticed the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, the way his body remained balanced for instant action. A warrior's stance, even here in the seat of cosmic power. Behind Jordan stood two other Green Lanterns, a massive being with a face like a boar, and muscles that suggested he could tear a viper apart with his bare hands, and a dark-skinned human male whose architectural knowledge of the chamber suggested long familiarity with Oa's impossible structures. You are Commander Adama of the vessel designated Battlestar Galactica, one of the Guardians stated, his voice carrying no inflection, no emotion, just pure declarative fact. You command a fleet of 220 vessels containing approximately 67,000 biological entities of human genetic baseline. You claim to be refugees from a conflict with synthetic intelligences you designate as Cylons. You claim to seek a world called Earth. It was not a question. Somehow, in the microns, since the green light had transported them from the Galactica's bridge to this impossible chamber, the Guardians had extracted every detail of their situation from their minds, their computers, or simply from the fundamental structure of reality itself. That is correct, Adama replied, keeping his voice level despite the violation he felt at having his thoughts laid bare before these ancient beings. The Cylons destroyed the 12 colonies of man in a coordinated attack. We are all that remains of human civilization. We search for the lost 13th colony, Earth, where we might find sanctuary and rebuild. Impossible, another Guardian stated flatly. Humanity originates on the planet Earth, Sector 2814. There are no 12 colonies. There is no secondary human civilization. Your existence contradicts established universal records spanning 3 billion years. Adama felt the ground shifting beneath him. Not literally, though, in this place of impossible physics, he wouldn't have been surprised, but conceptually. Everything the Guardians said suggested that the Earth he sought, the Earth that the sacred scrolls promised, already existed. But it was an Earth that had never heard of the colonies, never known Kobol, never scattered its children among the stars. We are not from your universe, Tai said suddenly, his military mind cutting through the metaphysical confusion to the tactical reality. That jump, something happened. We crossed dimensions. Not just distance. Correct, a third Guardian acknowledged. Analysis of residual energy signatures indicates transdimensional breach originating from quantum instabilities in your faster-than-light propulsion system. The probability of such an occurrence is approximately 1 in 4.7 trillion. Your arrival here is, by any reasonable metric, impossible. Yet you exist. This presents complications. Hal Jordan stepped forward, his expression suggesting he'd had enough of Guardian speak. What they're trying to say is that you shouldn't be here, but you are. And now we need to figure out what to do about it. He looked directly at Adama, one commander to another. The Guardians created the Green Lantern Corps to maintain order in the universe. 3,600 lanterns, each protecting a space sector. We're cops, i.e. essentially, cosmic cops. And you just drove a warship fleet into headquarters asking for asylum from a war we can't verify and enemies we can't detect. The Cylons are real, Apollo interjected, his fighter pilot's pride stung by the implied doubt. They murdered billions. They hunted us across the galaxy. Just because they didn't follow us through whatever dimensional barrier we crossed doesn't mean they aren't out there, still searching, still killing. We believe you, the massive boar-faced lantern rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Kilowog, Sector 674. I've seen plenty of synthetic species try to exterminate their creators. Manhunters nearly did the same thing a few millennia back, before the Guardians created us lanterns to replace them. Your story has the ring of truth. The ring of truth is insufficient for policy determination, a Guardian countered. Commander Adama, you command military vessels equipped with nuclear armaments and kinetic weapons capable of planetary bombardment. Your tactical database contains strategies for total warfare, including civilian population centers. You are, by definition, a potential threat to universal stability. Adama's jaw tightened. We are survivors. Every weapon we carry exists to protect the fleet from annihilation. We have never fired on civilian populations. We have never, another Guardian interrupted. Your own memories contain the destruction of the Cylon homeworld during the original war. Atomics deployed against their cities. Millions of synthetic intelligences terminated in nuclear fire. The words hung in the emerald void like an accusation. Adama had never spoken of that operation, had tried to bury the memory of those terrible days when the colonies had struck back against their rebellious creations with total warfare. That the Cylons had later returned that genocide 1,000-fold did not erase the original sin. That was war, Adama said quietly. A war we didn't start but had to finish, or thought we'd finished. War, the lead Guardian repeated. The primary justification for violation of universal law across all known civilizations. The Green Lantern Corps exists, Commander Adama, because beings like you, warriors, survivors, those who have seen their worlds burn, inevitably conclude that only superior force can prevent future burning. This logic is sound. It is also the foundation of tyranny. John Stewart, the dark-skinned lantern, shifted uncomfortably. Guardians, with respect, the man just lost his entire civilization. Maybe we could save the philosophy lecture for after we've determined if his people need medical aid or supplies. The physical needs of 67,000 beings are trivial, a Guardian replied. Matter replication technology could provide sustenance and medical care indefinitely. The question is not whether we can help, but whether we should. Whether integrating a transdimensional military force into this universe serves the cause of order or chaos. Adama realized, with cold certainty, that he was not standing before benevolent saviors but before judges, ancient, powerful beings who measured his entire species against cosmic scales he barely understood and found them wanting. The green light that had seemed so beautiful from the Galactica's bridge now felt like the glow of an executioner's blade. "What are you saying?" he asked bluntly. "That you'll let 67,000 innocent people die because we carry weapons? Because we fought wars? Because we don't meet your standards of cosmic purity?" "We are saying," the lead Guardian replied with infinite patience and zero mercy, "that your arrival presents an unprecedented decision. You seek Earth. Earth exists in this universe, in Sector 2814, protected by Green Lanterns Jordan and Stewart. But that Earth knows nothing of Kobol, nothing of the colonies, nothing of your history. You are strangers claiming kinship with a people who will not recognize you. You are warriors seeking sanctuary in a universe that has its own wars, its own darkness, its own threats to order. The Guardian stood, and despite his diminutive stature, seemed to fill the chamber with presence. The Green Lantern Corps swears an oath. In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. But you, Commander Adama, are neither evil nor good by our standards. You are unknown. And the unknown is the most dangerous variable in universal stability. So what happens now? Apollo demanded. You've scanned our minds, analyzed our weapons, judged our history. What's your verdict? For the first time, the Guardians exchanged glances among themselves, a wordless communication that suggested even these ancient beings had not reached consensus. Finally, the lead Guardian spoke again. You will remain on Oa for 72 Earth hours while we deliberate your fate. Your fleet will be held in orbital stasis, unharmed but unable to depart. During this time, Green Lanterns Jordan, Stewart, and Kilowog will conduct detailed interviews with your personnel and inspect your vessels for full tactical assessment. At the end of this period, we will render judgment on 3 questions. First, whether you represent a threat to universal order. Second, whether you will be permitted to seek Earth in this dimension. Third, whether the Green Lantern Corps will assist you in your search or whether you will be returned to your own dimension to face whatever fate awaits you there. The emerald light flared brighter, and Adama felt the unmistakable sensation of dismissal. 72 hours, Commander, Hal Jordan said, his voice carrying unexpected sympathy. Make them count. If the Guardians decide you're too dangerous to let roam free, there's nothing I can do to stop them. And trust me, you don't want to see what happens when the entire Green Lantern Corps considers you a threat. As the green light transported them back to the Galactica, Adama caught one final glimpse of the Guardians' faces. Ancient, emotionless, utterly certain of their cosmic authority. They were not evil, but they were not kind either. They were order incarnate, and the colonial fleet had just crashed into their perfectly maintained universe like a stone through crystal. The Green Lanterns came aboard the Galactica like inspectors entering a museum of primitive warfare. Adama watched from the observation deck as Hal Jordan drifted through the launch bay, his ring generating constructs that scanned every Viper, every munitions rack, every structural support beam with methodical precision. The emerald light played across the battle-scarred hull plating, highlighting lost blast scorches and kinetic impact craters, the archaeological record of the fleet's desperate flight. John Stewart moved with different energy, his architect's eye examining the Galactica's construction with professional interest, occasionally nodding in what might have been appreciation for colonial engineering. Kilowog simply stood in the center of the bay, arms crossed, radiating the kind of physical presence that made seasoned warriors instinctively check their sidearms. They're not impressed, Apollo said quietly, standing beside his father. They look at the Galactica like we'd look at a wooden sailing ship. Perhaps, Adama replied. But wooden sailing ships crossed Earth's oceans when nothing else could. Technology is not the measure of a people's worth. Try telling that to beings who can fly through space by thinking about it. Starbuck emerged from a nearby corridor, his flight suit still bearing grease stains from maintaining his Viper. The pilot's usual irreverent grin was absent, replaced by the tense expression of someone who'd spent the last few hours being interrogated by cosmic police. Commander, the big guy, Kilowog, he wants to see our best pilots in action. Says he needs to assess our combat capabilities. I think he wants to see if we're actually any good or just lucky refugees who stumbled through dimensions by accident. And what did you tell him? I told him colonial warriors don't perform for audiences. Then he created an entire asteroid field out of green light and challenged me to navigate it. Starbuck's grin finally surfaced, sharp and competitive. I'm about to show him that Green Lantern fancy doesn't impress a Viper pilot who learned to fly in the Straits of Caprica. Before Adama could respond, Hal Jordan's voice echoed through the bay's comm system. Commander Adama, we need to talk. Private. Your ready room, if you've got one. 5 seconds later, Adama sat across from Jordan in the modest chamber that served as the Galactica's command center during non-combat operations. The Green Lantern had dismissed his emerald aura, looking more human without the cosmic power radiating from every pore. though the ring on his finger still pulsed with barely restrained energy. "I'm going to level with you, Commander," Jordan began, leaning forward with the directness of someone who'd spent too many years navigating Guardian bureaucracy. "The Guardians are scared. They won't admit it. Hell, they probably don't even recognize the emotion. But your arrival has them rattled. You know why? Because we shouldn't exist. Because you prove the multiverse is real, unstable, and permeable." Jordan ran a hand through his hair. "Or the Guardians have spent 3 billion years maintaining order in this universe. They've fought manhunters, antimatter beings, universe-ending threats I can't even pronounce. But all of those threats came from here. They could be predicted, analyzed, countered. You're from somewhere else entirely. And if you can punch through from your dimension to ours accidentally, what else might come through deliberately?" Adama considered this. "You're saying we're not being judged for who we are, but for what we represent. A breach in the walls of reality itself." "Exactly." Jordan's ring flared briefly, projecting a three-dimensional star chart between them. "See this? Sector 2814, Earth Sector. My sector. I've protected these star systems for years, faced down alien invasions, planet killers, cosmic parasites. But I've always known the rules. Physics, tactics, the limitations of what's possible. You just rewrote those rules by existing." The star chart shifted, zooming out to show thousands of sectors, each containing countless star systems. "The core maintains order across all of this. 3,600 lanterns, each one chosen because they possess extraordinary willpower, the ability to overcome great fear. We're the thin green line between civilization and chaos, but we operate on predictable principles. Your faster-than-light technology, your dimensional breach, none of it should be possible according to the physics we've spent millennia mapping." "I'm not a scientist," Adama said carefully. "I can't explain how our FTL drives work on a theoretical level. I just know that when we jump, we cross vast distances instantly. If that somehow tore a hole between universes..." He paused, the implications settling like lead in his stomach. "The Cylons have the same technology. If they determine how we crossed over, they could follow." Jordan's expression darkened. "That's what I'm afraid of. I read the tactical reports your computers provided. The Cylons are relentless, logical, and utterly dedicated to human extinction. If they breach into our universe, they won't just hunt your fleet. They'll see an entire galaxy of organic life to exterminate. Billions of human beings on Earth alone, completely unprepared for an enemy that thinks like a machine and fights like a force of nature." "Then help us," Adama urged. "Give us the means to seal the breach behind us, or at least to defend ourselves if the Cylons follow. You have power beyond anything in colonial experience. Surely, it's not that simple." Jordan stood, pacing the small ready room like a caged predator. "The Guardians don't just hand out Green Lantern rings to anyone who asks. Each ring is connected to the central power battery on OA, sustained by the combined willpower of the core. And each lantern is chosen through rigorous testing. We have to prove we can overcome fear, maintain absolute focus, resist corruption. The ring is the most powerful weapon in the universe. In the wrong hands, it's also the most dangerous." He stopped pacing, looked directly at Adama. "I've watched you, Commander. I've read your service record, your command decisions during the Cylon attack on the colonies. You're a good man, a capable leader. But you're also a warrior who's spent his entire life fighting. The ring responds to willpower, yes, but it also amplifies the wielder's essential nature. Give a ring to someone driven by rage, and they become rage incarnate. Give it to someone driven by fear, and they create monsters from their nightmares." "And you think I'm driven by vengeance?" Adama said quietly. "That if I possessed that kind of power, I'd use it to hunt the Cylons across dimensions, consequences be damned." Jordan didn't deny it. "Wouldn't you?" The question hung between them like an accusation. Adama thought of Caprica burning, of the evacuation ships that hadn't made it out, of the children crying in the Galactica's corridors for parents who would never answer. He thought of President Adar's betrayal, of Count Baltar's treason, of the thousand small deaths of hope he'd witnessed as the fleet ran and never stopped running. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'd like to think I'd use such power responsibly. But I've never faced that temptation. No one in the colonies has." Honest answer. Jordan sat back down, his expression thoughtful. The Guardians will appreciate that at least. They value logic over emotion, but they respect self-awareness. The Green Lantern's ring pulsed, and for a moment his eyes glowed with emerald light. I'm being summoned. Kilowog's finished his assessment of your pilots. Whatever he's found, the Guardians want to hear it now. As Jordan stood to leave, Adama asked the question that had been gnawing at him since the Guardians' ultimatum. If they decide we're too dangerous, if they vote to send us back to our own dimension, what are our chances of survival? Jordan paused at the door. Against the Cylons? With your fleet already damaged, supplies running low, and no idea where you'd emerge in your universe? He met Adama's eyes with the brutal honesty of someone who'd seen too many lost causes. None. You'd be sending 67,000 people to their deaths. And if we resist, if we refuse the Guardian's judgment, then you'd face the full might of the Green Lantern Corps. 3,600 beings who can create anything they can imagine, who fought gods and won, who maintain order across a universe spanning trillions of light years. Jordan's voice softened. Don't make me fight you, Commander. I've read enough about your people to know you deserve better than extinction. But I swore an oath to the Guardians, and I'll keep it, even if it means doing something that'll haunt me for the rest of my life. After Jordan left, Adama sat alone in the ready room, staring at the blank bulkhead where the star chart had floated moments before. Somewhere in this impossible universe was Earth, the planet his people had sought for generations, the promised sanctuary that might finally mean safety. But it was an Earth that didn't know them, protected by powers that judged them as threats rather than refugees. The comm chimed. Bridge to Commander. Sir, the Guardians are requesting your presence again. They say Kilowog has made a recommendation. They're ready to begin formal deliberations. Adama straightened his uniform. Pushed himself to his feet with the weariness of command settling on his shoulders like a physical weight. In less than a day, these ancient beings would decide whether the last survivors of the 12 colonies lived or died. And there was absolutely nothing he could do to influence that decision except hope that willpower, the quality these Green Lanterns valued above all else, would be recognized when the Guardians looked into colonial hearts and saw people who'd refused to surrender even when their entire civilization burned. The Cylon base star materialized in Sector 2814, like a wound opening in space itself. Adama was in the Guardian chamber when the alarms began, not audible sirens, but a sudden shift in the emerald light that flooded the room, turning from steady radiance to a pulsing urgency that needed no translation. The Guardians, one who had been in the middle of questioning him about colonial weapons doctrine, froze in perfect unison, their ancient eyes suddenly blazing with information flowing from sources Adama couldn't comprehend. Impossible, one Guardian stated, the word carrying more emotion than Adama had heard from any of them. Dimensional breach detected. Sector 2814, Subsector Gamma. Energy signature matches. Colonial FTL technology, but with significant variations. Synthetic intelligence neural patterns detected. Analysis concludes. Cylon forces have entered our universe. The bottom dropped out of Adama's stomach. How many? One capital vessel. Approximately 300 synthetic fighter craft. Trajectory suggests deliberate pursuit vector matching Colonial Fleet's dimensional breach pattern. The Guardian's voice remained clinically neutral, but Adama could hear the unspoken accusation. You brought them here. Hal Jordan burst into the chamber without ceremony, his entire body encased in emerald light, the symbol on his chest blazing like a challenge to the universe itself. Guardians, I've got John and Kilowog scrambling every available lantern in sector. Whatever just jumped in is big, ugly, and scanning everything in range like it's searching for something. I'm guessing our refugees just got followed. Commander Adama, the lead Guardian said, turning those ancient, terrible eyes on him. You will return to your vessel immediately and remain in orbit under Green Lantern containment. The Corps will intercept and assess this new arrival. If it proves hostile, it's hostile, Adama interrupted. Military protocol be damned. The Cylons exist for one purpose, the extinction of humanity. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They analyze, adapt, and exterminate. If they've found a way to follow us here, they won't stop until every human in this universe is dead. starting with my fleet. Your assessment is noted, the Guardian replied. It changes nothing. You remain in containment until a second alarm pulsed through the chamber, more urgent than the first. Another Guardian spoke, his voice carrying the terrible weight of confirmed nightmare. Second dimensional breach. Sector 2814, Subsector Delta. Identical energy signature. 2 additional Cylon capital vessels detected. Fighter complement, 600 and rising. They are replicating. The breaches are accelerating. Adama felt the universe tilting. They're not just following us, they're invading. Now, once they confirmed the breach was stable enough for one base star, they sent more. That's Cylon doctrine. Overwhelming force, coordinated assault, no retreat. Jordan's ring flared brighter. Guardians, we need to move now. If they're coming through in force, we need to hit them before they establish a beachhead and start analyzing our capabilities. Cylons adapt. That's what the commander's files say. Every second we wait, they're learning about us. The Green Lantern Corps will engage, the lead Guardian declared, but not with colonial involvement. Commander Adama, you and your people have brought this threat to our universe. You will remain in stasis while we determine if the Cylons can be contained or if the dimensional breach itself must be sealed, with your fleet on whichever side of it serves universal order. You can't, Adama started, but the green light was already transporting him, pulling him back toward the Galactica against his will. The last thing he saw was Hal Jordan's face, conflicted and angry, before the Guardian chamber dissolved into emerald radiance. He materialized on the Galactica's bridge to organized chaos. Ty was already at tactical, coordinating with the other fleet vessels while trying to make sense of scanner readings that showed impossible things. Apollo stood at the navigation console, his young face set in the grim expression of someone watching disaster unfold in real time. Father, Apollo said the moment Adama appeared. Masha 3 Cylon base stars, bearing Mark 315. They're launching raiders in waves. And there's something else. The Green Lanterns are engaging. But the Cylons... He trailed off, his voice mixing awe and horror. The Cylons are learning. Adama crossed to the tactical display in 3 strides. The holographic projection showed a battlefield unlike anything in colonial military history. Green lanterns, dozens of them now, emerald streaks of living light, danced through space around the angular, hostile shapes of Cylon base stars. He watched as Hal Jordan created a construct of pure willpower, a massive cannon that fired coherent energy beams capable of vaporizing Cylon raiders by the dozen. Kilowog manifested a shield the size of a cruiser, intercepting missile fire that would have obliterated a civilian transport. Our John Stewart built geometric structures in space, lattices of hard light that trapped raiders and crushed them like insects in a closing fist. It should have been a massacre. The Green Lanterns wielded power that made colonial weaponry look like primitive clubs. But the Cylons were doing what they always did: analyzing, adapting, surviving. Tactical analysis, Adama ordered. What are they learning? Ty's fingers flew over the scanner controls. The Cylons have already modified their tactics. First wave of raiders attacked in standard formation. The lanterns destroyed them easily. Second wave came in scattered, irregular patterns. Harder to target. Third wave. He paused, highlighting a section of the display. Third wave is using the debris from destroyed raiders as cover, masking their approach. And the base stars themselves are generating some kind of interference pattern. Watch. Adama watched as a Green Lantern, not one of the 3 he knew, someone from another sector, created a massive fist construct and drove it toward a base star's hull. Just before impact, the Cylon ship emitted a pulse of energy that made the construct flicker, lose cohesion. The punch that should have cracked the base star open instead dispersed like smoke. They're analyzing the green light, Adama realized with cold certainty. Learning its frequency, its structure, finding ways to disrupt it. Which should be impossible, a new voice said. Adama turned to find Hal Jordan standing on his bridge, having appeared without warning or request. The Green Lantern's face was grim, his uniform showing scorch marks that suggested near misses even his power couldn't entirely prevent. The green light of willpower doesn't operate on electromagnetic frequencies, It's not technology. It's emotional energy given form through the ring's connection to the central power battery. There's nothing to analyze in conventional terms. The Cylons aren't conventional, Apollo said. They think like machines, but they learn like living things. It's what makes them so dangerous. Jordan's ring pulsed, projecting tactical data directly into the Galactica's computers. They're not just learning, they're evolving their strategy in real time. Kilowog estimates they've already adapted to 40% of our standard attack patterns. At this rate, within an hour, they'll have developed effective countermeasures to basic constructs. On within 2 hours. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The Guardians, Adama said. What are they doing? Deliberating, Jordan replied, bitter irony dripping from the word. They're watching the battle, analyzing Cylon capabilities, running probability matrices on universal threat assessment. They're doing everything except making a decision about what to do with you and your fleet. We can help, Adama insisted. My pilots know Cylon tactics. We've fought them for yarns. Let us launch our Vipers, coordinate with your forces. The Guardians have you locked in orbital stasis. I can't override that without direct authorization, and they're not granting it. Jordan's frustration was palpable. They're treating you as a separate problem from the Cylon invasion, when any tactical moron can see the two issues are connected. You're the Cylon's target. Use that. Starbuck's voice crackled over the comm. Bridge, this is Alpha Bay. Sir, the Vipers are armed and ready. We're sitting here watching Cylons tear into ships that are trying to protect us. With respect, that's not acceptable. Colonial warriors don't hide while others fight. Adama looked at Jordan. Can you get us out? Override the stasis field? Give us just enough freedom to launch fighters? If I do that, I'm violating Guardian orders. I'll be court-martialed, probably lose my ring, definitely lose my sector assignment. But you'll save lives, Apollo interjected. Those Cylons won't stop with our fleet. You said Earth is in Sector 2814. Once they finish analyzing your tactics, once they've established total superiority, what do you think they'll do? They'll search for the nearest concentration of organic human life and begin systematic extermination. That's what they do. Jordan's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he stood perfectly still, the weight of cosmic law pressing against the immediate tactical reality. Then his ring flared, brighter than Adama had seen it, and the Galactica shuddered as invisible forces released their grip. You've got one launch window, Jordan said quietly. Make it count. And Commander? When the Guardians come asking why I disobeyed their direct orders, I'm telling them you convinced me with superior tactical logic. So you better make damn sure your pilots are as good as you claim. Adama was already moving, his voice booming through the ship-wide comm. All Vipers, launch status. This is Commander Adama. We are weapons-free. Target designations will coordinate with Green Lantern forces. Remember your training. Remember your purpose. And remember, the Cylons followed us here, but by Kobol's gods, we'll make them regret it. Launch when ready. Through the viewport, Adama watched as the launch bays opened and silver Vipers began streaming into space, their sleek forms so much smaller and more fragile than the cosmic powers arrayed around them. But they flew with precision born of desperation, with skill earned through survival, with courage that needed no ring to sustain it. In the distance, a Cylon base star rotated to bring its weapons to bear on the emerging colonial fighters. Its scanning arrays pulsed with malevolent light as ancient enemy recognized ancient enemy across the impossible gulf between universes. And the battle for Sector 2814, for Earth, for humanity, for the right to exist in a cosmos that suddenly seemed far too small, truly began. Starbuck hit the afterburners and rolled his Viper through a lattice of green light that John Stewart had just constructed to funnel Cylon raiders into a kill zone. I love working with telepathic architecture, he muttered into his comm, lining up a raider in his sights. The Cylon ship jinked left, predictable as always, and Starbuck fired a 3-round burst that punched through its hull and sent it spiraling into the void. Apollo, you seeing this? The lanterns build walls in space and we shoot anything stupid enough to fly between them. Stay focused, Starbuck, Apollo's voice came back, tight with concentration. The Kilowog just told me these Cylons are adapting faster than any enemy the Corps has faced. Don't get cocky. Cocky is my natural state. It's why the ladies... a Cylon raider dropped onto his 6 o'clock with impossible speed, having apparently learned to use the debris field for cover exactly as colonial tactics would suggest. Starbuck jerked the stick hard right, but the raider matched him, its targeting computer already compensating for evasive maneuvers. Lasfire stitched across his port wing, alarms screaming as systems went critical. Then a massive green fist, literally a fist, complete with knuckles and thumb, materialized from nowhere and swatted the Cylon raider like an insect. Kilowog's voice rumbled across the tactical channel. "Watch your six, Poozer. These chrome domes are learning our rhythm." "Appreciated, our big guy," Starbuck replied, checking his damaged systems. Port stabilizer was gone, fuel cells reading yellow, but the Viper still flew. Though the fist construct was a bit on the nose, don't you think? "Form follows function, meat sack. Now get back in formation before I have to save your butt again." Despite the situation, Starbuck grinned. He liked Kilowog. The massive alien had spent the last hour running colonial pilots through tactical drills that would have impressed even the academy instructors on Caprica, all while maintaining a running commentary that mixed brutal honesty with unexpected respect for their skills. When Starbuck had executed a particularly difficult split S maneuver to avoid 3 raiders simultaneously, Kilowog had actually grunted approval. From a being who could create entire starships with his thoughts, that grunt meant something. The tactical situation, however, was deteriorating. Starbuck could see it even without Apollo's running commentary or the Galactica's strategic analysis. The first engagement had gone well. Green Lanterns and Vipers working in concert, using the Colonials' knowledge of Cylon tactics, combined with the Corps' overwhelming power to destroy raiders and damage 2 of the base stars. But the Cylons were learning. They'd stopped flying in predictable attack formations. They'd started using captured colonial evasion patterns against the Vipers. And worst of all, they'd begun targeting the Green Lanterns with tactics that shouldn't work, shouldn't even be possible, but were proving devastatingly effective. "All colonial craft, this is Hal Jordan," the channel crackled. "Fall back to defensive formation around the fleet. We've got a problem." Starbuck vectored back toward the Galactica, watching as the swarm of Vipers consolidated into protective screens around the civilian vessels. From this vantage, he could see what Jordan meant. One of the Cylon base stars had stopped engaging entirely. It simply hung in space, its scanning arrays pulsing with rhythmic precision, observing, analyzing, learning. And the other 2 base stars were now deploying raiders in patterns that seemed specifically designed to counter Green Lantern constructs. They'd learned that large, solid structures, shields, walls, hammers, could be disrupted by concentrated fire. So they were attacking with dispersed swarms that made large constructs inefficient. They'd learned that Green Lanterns could create multiple constructs simultaneously, so they were attacking from multiple vectors to divide attention. They'd even learned, somehow, to predict which lanterns would create which types of constructs based on their psychological profiles. "How are they doing this?" Apollo's voice cut through the tactical chatter, addressing Jordan directly. "You said the green light operates on willpower, on emotion. How are machines analyzing emotion?" "They're not analyzing emotion," John Stewart replied, his architect's mind working through the problem even as he created a series of geometric barriers to protect a civilian transport. "They're analyzing patterns. We Lanterns might create constructs based on willpower, but we're still individuals with habits, preferences, tactical tendencies. I build structures. Hal builds weapons. Kilowog builds defenses. Us, the Cylons, have figured out our individual patterns, and they're exploiting them." "So change the patterns," Starbuck suggested. "Do something random. Create things they can't predict." "Easier said than done when you've spent years training your instincts to react a certain way in combat," Jordan responded. "But you're right. We need to—" The third base star, the one that had been hanging back, suddenly surged forward. But it wasn't attacking the Green Lanterns or the Vipers. It was heading directly for the civilian fleet, its weapons charging with the distinctive energy signature that every colonial survivor knew meant nuclear ordnance. "They're targeting the civilians," Ty's voice roared across the channel. "All Vipers, intercept. Galactica is engaging with main batteries." Starbuck was already moving, his damaged Viper screaming in protest as he pushed it beyond recommended thrust. Around him, every colonial fighter pilot did the same, because this was the nightmare scenario they'd trained for. Fought through, survived countless times. The Cylons always went for the civilians once they'd assessed military capabilities. It was the logical play, force the defenders to choose between tactical advantage and protecting the innocent. But this time, the defenders could create miracles. Kilowog appeared between the base star and the fleet, and the construct he manifested was nothing Starbuck had seen before. It wasn't a wall or a fist or a weapon. It was a perfect sphere of green light that expanded to encompass the entire civilian fleet. A shield so massive, it must have been drawing power from every reserve the big alien possessed. Onto the base star's nuclear missiles impacted against that sphere and detonated in silent, brilliant flowers of atomic fire that looked almost beautiful from inside the protection of emerald willpower. "Now that's showing off," Starbuck muttered, watching the firestorm wash harmlessly across Kilowog's construct. "Now that's duty," Kilowog rumbled back, his voice strained with effort. "Every sentient being under this shield is under Green Lantern protection. The Cylons want 'em. They go through me first." The Cylon base star's scanning arrays pulsed brighter, analyzing, learning, calculating. Then it did something that made Starbuck's blood run cold. It stopped attacking Kilowog's shield, and instead launched every remaining raider directly at Kilowog himself. "They've figured it out," Apollo said, horrified realization in his voice. The shield isn't automated. Kilowog has to actively maintain it with his concentration. If they can distract him, break his focus." "The shield drops and the civilians die," Jordan finished. "All fighters, protect Kilowog. Don't let those raiders reach him." What followed was the most desperate furball Starbuck had ever flown. 300 Cylon raiders, all focused on a single target, met by every Viper in the colonial fleet and a dozen Green Lanterns who created a killing field of emerald death. Starbuck's damaged fighter took hits that should have destroyed it, but somehow stayed together through a combination of colonial engineering and sheer stubborn refusal to die. He watched Jolly's Viper explode in a ball of flame, watched Greenbean take a last blast through the cockpit and spiral away trailing freezing atmosphere, watched pilot after pilot make the last choice a warrior can make, sacrifice for those who couldn't fight. But they held. Lords of Kobol they held. And through it all, Kilowog maintained that sphere of green light, his massive frame visible inside the construct, every muscle straining with the effort of protecting 67,000 souls he'd never met, in a war that wasn't his, against an enemy that had no business existing in his universe. "This is what willpower looks like," Jon Stewart said quietly over the channel, creating deadly precise constructs that speared through Cylon raiders with geometric perfection. Not power, not technology, just the absolute refusal to let innocent people die. The tide turned when Hal Jordan stopped creating weapons and started creating chaos. His ring flared with brilliant light, and suddenly the space around the attacking base star was filled with copies. Dozens of Green Lanterns, all looking exactly like Jordan, all creating different constructs, all attacking from different vectors. The Cylons tried to analyze, to determine which was real, to adapt their tactics. But willpower shaped by imagination and desperation defied logical analysis. While the Cylons were distracted, the Galactica maneuvered into firing position and unleashed a full spread of nuclear-tipped missiles directly into the base star's primary weapons array. The colonial warship might be primitive by Green Lantern standards, but her weapons were very, very real. The base star's hull breached, secondary explosions rippling through its structure as ancient colonial fury met machine logic and proved that sometimes the old ways still worked. The remaining two base stars began to withdraw, their tactical computers apparently concluding that the battle had become unwinnable. They'd learned everything they needed to learn about Green Lantern capabilities. They'd tested the limits of colonial courage, and they'd determined that this universe, unlike the one they'd left behind, had defenders who could actually stop them. For now. "Let them go," Jordan ordered, though Starbuck could hear the frustration in his voice. "We don't know how many more might be waiting to jump in. We need to regroup, assess damage, figure out how to seal that dimensional breach before..." The fourth breach opened. But what emerged wasn't another base star. It was something worse. Through the scanner displays, Starbuck watched as a Cylon ship of completely different design materialized. Sleeker, more advanced, radiating energy signatures that made the base stars look primitive. And from it, a single transmission broadcast across all frequencies in a voice that was somehow both mechanical and terrifyingly intelligent. By your command, Imperious Leader has analyzed this new universe. We have found it acceptable. The extinction protocols will now expand to include all organic life in Sector 2814, beginning with the planet designated Earth. In the command chair of the Galactica, Adama felt the weight of impossible guilt settle on his shoulders. They'd fled their universe to save their people. And in doing so, they'd led the Cylons to a universe full of billions who had no idea what was coming for them. Behind him, Hal Jordan's ring blazed brighter than Starbuck had ever seen it, and the Green Lantern's voice carried absolute conviction that bordered on rage. Like hell you will. All Lanterns, all colonial forces, we are not letting these chrome bastards anywhere near Earth. Guardians be damned. We end this. Now. The Guardians materialized on the Galactica's bridge in a cascade of emerald light, their diminutive forms radiating power that made the air itself crackle with potential energy. Green Lantern Jordan, the lead Guardian stated, his voice devoid of inflection but carrying the weight of cosmic authority. You have violated direct orders, released the colonial fleet from containment, and engaged Cylon forces without authorization. Your actions constitute insubordination of the highest order. Jordan stood his ground, although Adama could see the tension in the pilot's stance, the instinctive military bearing of someone facing court-martial. With respect, Guardians, those Cylon forces were targeting civilian vessels. The Green Lantern Oath doesn't come with a clause about waiting for permission before protecting innocent lives. The oath serves universal order, another Guardian replied. Individual interpretation of duty is precisely why the Corps requires Guardian oversight. Your emotional response to immediate crisis has compromised strategic assessment of long-term threat. My emotional response just saved 67,000 people from nuclear annihilation, Jordan shot back, his ring flaring in response to his rising anger. While you were running probability matrices, Kilowog was holding a shield that prevented genocide. Yet if that's insubordination, then maybe the oath needs rewriting. The temperature in the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. The Guardians' collective gaze fixed on Jordan with the kind of attention that suggested they were considering far more than just his words. They were analyzing his psychological state, his fitness for duty, his continued worthiness to wield the ring. Adama stepped forward before the confrontation could escalate further. Guardians, if I may, the Cylons just broadcast their intentions across all frequencies. They're targeting Earth. Whatever judgment you were planning to render on my fleet is now secondary to preventing the extinction of your universe's human population. We are aware of Cylon's strategic declarations, a Guardian responded. Analysis indicates the threat is significant but manageable. The Green Lantern Corps can establish defensive perimeters around Earth and other high-population worlds. The Cylons will be contained, studied, and eventually neutralized or expelled back through the dimensional breach. Eventually isn't good enough, Apollo interjected, his youth allowing him a bluntness that made Adama wince internally. The Cylons don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They adapt. Every second you give them to analyze your capabilities is a second they're using to develop countermeasures. By the time you've finished containing them, they'll have figured out how to counter every tactic in your playbook. Your assessment is based on limited Cylon encounters in your home universe, a Guardian stated. This universe operates under different physical laws, and the Cylons' adaptive capabilities may be significantly reduced when confronting technologies that exceed their baseline analytical frameworks. Colonel Tai pulled up tactical displays, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the Galactica's computers. Is that why the base star that withdrew is already broadcasting new combat algorithms to the others? Or why their energy signatures are shifting to frequencies designed to interfere with Green Lantern constructs? The Cylons have been in your universe for less than 6 hours, and they've already adapted to 40% of your standard tactics. Give them a week, and they'll have adaptive strategies for everything you can throw at them. The Guardians fell silent, but Adama could see data flowing between them. Some kind of instantaneous communication that bypassed language entirely. When they spoke again, it was with a unity that suggested consensus reached at speeds human minds couldn't match. The situation has evolved beyond initial parameters. New assessment required. The lead guardian turned to Adama. Commander, you possess the most extensive combat experience against Cylon forces. Tactical consultation is requested. What is your strategic recommendation? Adama had commanded men in battle for most of his adult life. He'd made decisions that sent thousands to their deaths. He'd calculated odds, weighed risks, sacrificed pawns to protect the larger force. But he'd never been asked to strategize on a cosmic scale against an enemy that had already destroyed one universe's worth of humanity and now threatened another. The Cylons think like a network, he began, moving to the tactical display. Individual ships, individual raiders, they're all nodes in a larger intelligence. When one learns, they all learn. That's their greatest strength and their critical vulnerability. He highlighted the new Cylon vessel on the display, the sleeker, more advanced ship that had emerged from the latest breach. This ship is different from the base stars, more sophisticated. I'm guessing it's a command vessel, coordinating the others. In our universe, we called them Imperious Leaders, mobile command centers that processed tactical data and distributed it across the entire Cylon fleet. You're suggesting a decapitation strike, John Stewart said, his architectural mind immediately seeing the structural implications. Cut off the head, the body dies. Not dies, Adama corrected, becomes disconnected. Individual Cylon ships and raiders can still operate independently, but they lose the centralized learning capability. They can't share adaptations in real time. Each engagement becomes isolated rather than contributing to collective tactical evolution. Kilowog's massive form shifted, his scarred face thoughtful, despite the exhaustion from maintaining that shield. Problem is getting to the command ship. The Cylons ain't stupid. They'll have positioned it behind their defensive lines, protected by base stars and radar screens. And if they're adapting to our constructs, a frontal assault's going to be a meat grinder. So we don't go frontal, Starbuck's voice crackled over the comm from the pilot ready room. We go colonial. Apollo was already nodding, seeing where his friend's thoughts were heading. The Cylons have been analyzing Green Lantern tactics because that's what they've been facing. They've adapted to energy constructs, to willpower-based weapons, to tactics that rely on overwhelming cosmic power. But they haven't adapted to what we do. Conventional warfare, hit-and-run strikes, using inferior technology with superior tactics. You're proposing a combined strike, Jordan said, his tactical mind engaging despite the looming confrontation with the Guardians. Lanterns provide the heavy firepower and distraction. Colonial Vipers slip through the chaos using conventional engines and weapons that the Cylons might not prioritize as threats. Hit the command ship before they realize what's happening. It is tactically sound, a Guardian acknowledged. But it requires colonial forces to engage in direct combat against an enemy that has demonstrated genocidal intent toward your species. The psychological pressure of facing the very machines that destroyed your worlds may compromise combat effectiveness. Adama almost laughed at the clinical assessment. Guardian, every pilot in my fleet has already faced the Cylons in combat. Every one of them has watched worlds burn. If psychological pressure was going to break us, it would have happened during the fall of Caprica. We're still here. We're still fighting. That's all the evidence of combat effectiveness you need. The Guardians exchanged more silent communication. Finally, the lead Guardian spoke with something that might have been respect in his ancient voice. Tactical coordination is authorized. Green Lantern forces will engage Cylon defensive positions and create penetration corridor for colonial strike craft. Commander Adama will maintain strategic oversight. Green Lantern Jordan will coordinate combined operations despite his insubordination, which will be addressed after immediate threat is neutralized. Jordan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understood. One more thing, Adama said, knowing he was pushing his limited capital with the Guardians, but unable to leave the question unasked. After this is done, after we've stopped the Cylons, what happens to my fleet? Do we still face expulsion back to our universe? The Guardians' collective gaze settled on him with the weight of eons. That decision remains under deliberation. However, your tactical cooperation will be factored into final assessment. Your willingness to defend this universe despite uncertain personal status suggests character alignment consistent with Green Lantern core values. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even close to a guarantee. But it was more hope than Adama had felt since arriving in this impossible universe of flying gods and emerald light. "Prep your pilots, Commander," Jordan said, his ring already projecting tactical overlays. "We've got maybe 12 hours before the Cylons finish analyzing our response patterns and make their move toward Earth. That's our window. 12 hours to plan an assault on a ship we've barely scanned, protected by forces that learn from every engagement, using tactics we're inventing on the fly," Ty muttered. "I've seen better odds betting against a stacked deck." "Then it's a good thing we're not betting," Adama replied, his command voice cutting through the doubt like a knife through fog. "We're fighting. And if there's one thing the Cylons have never been able to adapt to, it's the simple fact that humanity refuses to die quietly." He turned to the Guardians, Colonial Commander addressing cosmic beings without flinching. "Assemble your lanterns. We'll assemble our pilots, and we'll show these machines that they made a critical error in their tactical calculations." "What error?" a Guardian asked. "They assumed that because we fled our universe, we'd be too broken to defend yours." Adama's eyes blazed with the fire that had kept the fleet alive through yarn of running. "They were wrong. Give us a target and a chance, and we'll prove it." The Guardians vanished in emerald light, she returning to Oa to coordinate the largest Green Lantern mobilization in recent cosmic history. Jordan remained, his expression mixing respect and something that might have been the beginning of friendship. "You know this is suicide tactics, right?" the Green Lantern said quietly. "Flying Vipers against a command ship surrounded by base stars and adaptive raiders. Even with our support, your casualty rates are going to be catastrophic." "I know," Adama replied. "Every pilot in this fleet knows. We've known since the moment the Cylons destroyed the colonies that we were fighting a war we couldn't win through superior force. All we've ever had is courage, skill, and the absolute conviction that humanity deserves to survive. If we have to prove that conviction one more time, in one more battle, against impossible odds..." He met Jordan's eyes. Then that's what colonial warriors do." Jordan's ring flared, and for a moment, Adama could have sworn he saw something in the Green Lantern's expression that looked like the desire to offer something more. Perhaps even one of those rings, that cosmic power that could level the playing field. But the moment passed, and Jordan simply nodded. "12 hours, Commander. Make them count." After Jordan left, Adama stood alone on the bridge, looking out at the stars of an alien universe that had become, by necessity and desperation, a battlefield worth defending. Somewhere out there, the Cylons were planning, learning, adapting. But so was humanity. And this time, humanity had allies who could shape willpower itself into weapons. The question was whether that would be enough. The briefing room aboard the Galactica had never held this many different forms of sentient life. Adama stood at the head of the tactical table, flanked by Apollo and Ty, facing an assembly that would have seemed impossible mere days ago. Hal Jordan leaned against the bulkhead with fighter pilot casualness, his ring projecting holographic star charts that merged seamlessly with colonial technology. John Stewart sat with perfect posture, his architect's eyes already analyzing structural weaknesses in the Cylon command ship's design. Kilowog took up nearly a quarter of the room's space, his massive arms crossed, his expression suggesting he'd rather be breaking things than talking about breaking things. And scattered among them were colonial pilots, Starbuck, Boomer, Athena, Mashiba, veterans who'd fought the Cylons so many times that facing them again felt less like terror and more like grim routine. "The target," Adama began, highlighting the sleek Cylon vessel on the display, "is what we're designating as the Imperious Leader-class command ship. Based on energy signature analysis and communications intercepts, this vessel is coordinating all Cylon operations in Sector 2814. It's not just transmitting orders, it's collecting tactical data from every engagement, processing it, and distributing adaptive strategies to all Cylon forces in real time." Jordan's ring enhanced the image, revealing details that colonial scanners couldn't detect. "The ship's got shielding technology we haven't seen before. Not energy-based like our constructs. Something else. Probably adaptive armor that reconfigures based on incoming weapon types. Which means if we hit it with the same thing twice, it'll be twice as effective at stopping it the second time. Lovely, Starbuck muttered. So we can't use proven tactics because proving them makes them obsolete. Precisely why this requires precision strike coordination, John Stewart said, his construct projections showing attack vectors with geometric perfection. The Green Lantern Corps will engage the defensive perimeter here, here, and here. 3 points around the Cylon formation lit up in emerald, drawing the base stars and raiders into extended combat. That creates a narrow window, approximately 4 minutes, where the command ship's immediate defenses will be reduced to automated systems and whatever radar screen they can't pull away. 4 minutes, Apollo said, studying the projected approach vectors. To penetrate Cylon defensive formations, avoid adaptive countermeasures, reach the command ship, identify critical systems, and destroy them before the defense perimeter collapses back. He looked at his father. Even for colonial warriors, that's pushing the edge of possible. Which is why we're not doing it alone, Adama replied. He nodded to Kilowog, who stepped forward with surprising grace for his bulk. Listen up, poozers, Kilowog rumbled, his scarred face deadly serious. I've been training with your pilots for the last 8 hours. I've seen what you can do with them primitive ships of yours. And I gotta say, you fly with more guts than sense, which I mean as a compliment. But guts ain't gonna be enough against adaptive tactical computers that'll predict every maneuver you make based on observed patterns. He activated his ring, creating a construct model of a Viper. So, we're gonna give the Cylons something they ain't observed. Each strike fighter is gonna be paired with a Green Lantern construct that masks its energy signature and trajectory. The Cylons will see the constructs, analyze them, adapt to them. While they're busy doing that, you poozers slip through using manual navigation and visual targeting. No electronics, no computers, nothing the Cylons can track or predict. Starbuck's eyes lit up with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm that had gotten him both commendations and reprimands throughout his career. You're talking about flying blind through a hostile formation, dodging lasfire we can't detect electronically, and hitting a target we can only see with our own eyes. That's insane. That's why you're perfect for it, Kilowog shot back. I watched you navigate that asteroid field I created. You fly on instinct and reflexes, not computer assistance. That's exactly what we need. Pilots who can operate when all the fancy technology fails. There's a philosophical problem, a new voice said. One of the Guardians had materialized in the corner of the briefing room, startling several colonial officers who still weren't accustomed to beings teleporting at will. This plan requires Green Lanterns to create deceptive constructs specifically designed to mislead enemy tactical analysis. Such deception contradicts the fundamental principle of willpower, which is based on transparent, absolute conviction, not misdirection. With respect, John Stewart said carefully, willpower can serve many purposes. Batman uses misdirection all the time, and he's got willpower in spades. The question isn't whether we can create deceptive constructs, it's whether we're willing to sacrifice philosophical purity for tactical necessity. The Guardian's ancient eyes studied Stewart. You referenced the human vigilante from Earth. Interesting parallel. He operates outside established law to serve what he perceives as higher justice. You suggest the Corps should do the same? I suggest, Stewart replied with the conviction of someone who'd found his line and was standing on it, saw that protecting innocent lives matters more than maintaining doctrinal consistency. If we can save Earth by bending our usual approach, then the oath demands we bend. The Guardian was silent for a long moment. Then, impossibly, something that might have been approval flickered across those ancient features. Your reasoning is sound. Proceed with tactical planning. The Corps will provide construct support as outlined. After the Guardian vanished, Jordan let out a breath he'd been holding. That was either brilliant or career-ending, Stewart. Possibly both. Wouldn't be the first time, Stewart replied with a slight smile. Adama pulled the focus back to the mission parameters. Strike team composition. 12 Vipers, our best pilots, each paired with a Green Lantern creating masking constructs. In primary objective, penetrate to the command ship and destroy its central processing core. Secondary objective, Disable communications arrays to prevent tactical data distribution to other Cylon forces. Question, Athena said, her voice carrying the analytical precision that made her one of the fleet's best tactical officers. If we destroy the command ship, won't the other Cylon vessels simply designate a new command node? They're a network. Eliminating one hub shouldn't collapse the entire system. Under normal circumstances, yes, Ty replied. But intelligence analysis suggests something different about this particular command ship. It's not just coordinating current operations. It's maintaining the dimensional breach itself. The energy signatures are tied to the same quantum instabilities that brought us here. If we destroy the command ship, we might collapse the breach, cutting off Cylon reinforcements and potentially trapping the forces already through. Apollo saw the implication immediately, which also might trap us in this universe permanently. The briefing room fell silent as that reality settled over the colonial officers. Return to their home universe had always been a theoretical possibility. Unlikely, perhaps, but possible. Destroying the dimensional breach would eliminate that possibility entirely. They would be permanent refugees in an alien cosmos, dependent on the mercy of the Guardians and the Green Lantern Corps for whatever future they might build. We're already trapped, Starbuck said quietly, his usual humor absent. The Cylons have the same FTL technology we do. Even if we went back through that breach, they'd just follow us again. We'd be leading them back to whatever remains of the colonies, back to any other survivors who might have escaped. At least here, in this universe, there are beings powerful enough to fight them. Starbuck's right, Boomer added. We came through that breach running from genocide. Going back means dying slow instead of dying now. At least here we've got a chance. Adama looked at each of his pilots in turn. Young faces aged by war, eyes that had seen too much death, hands that still reached for flight sticks with unwavering courage. These were the last colonial warriors, the final defenders of a civilization that existed now only in memory and determination. And they were volunteering, without hesitation, to close the door to their home universe forever, if it meant protecting this new one. Yeah, this is a volunteer mission, Adama said formally, military protocol demanding he give them the choice even though he already knew their answer. No one is ordered to fly this strike. If you choose to step back, there will be no shame, no judgment. You've already sacrificed more than any should be asked to give. No one moved. No one even considered moving. Figures, Jordan said, something like admiration in his voice. You people really don't know how to quit, do you? Quitting is for machines that calculate acceptable losses, Apollo replied. We're human. We do the impossible because nothing else is worth doing. Kilowog's rumbling laugh filled the briefing room. Oh, I like these poozers. Guardians are going to regret not recruiting the whole lot of them. The tactical planning continued for another 3 hours. Approach vectors, our target priorities, emergency protocols, contingencies for adaptive countermeasures. The Green Lanterns contributed power calculations and construct strategies while colonial pilots provided combat experience against Cylon tactics. It was, Adama realized, the kind of cooperation that arose only in desperate circumstances. Different species, different technologies, different philosophies united by the simple recognition that some things were worth dying to protect. As the briefing concluded and pilots began filing out to prepare their fighters, Hal Jordan pulled Adama aside. Commander, there's something you should know. The Guardians are watching this mission very closely, not just for tactical success, but for what it represents. If you and your people can work effectively with the Corps, if you can demonstrate that you're assets rather than threats. He paused, choosing his words carefully. There might be a place for the colonial fleet in this universe, not as refugees, but as allies. And if we fail? Adama asked. If the mission goes wrong, if the Cylons adapt faster than we anticipate, if we lose too many pilots, then the Guardians will probably decide that you've brought too much chaos to justify keeping around, Jordan replied with brutal honesty. They'll seal the breach, eject the Cylons back to your dimension, and do the same to your fleet. Send you back to face whatever's left of the war you fled. Adama nodded slowly. So this isn't just a military operation. It's a trial. One last test to determine if we deserve sanctuary. Welcome to cosmic politics, Jordan said, where even genocide is subject to bureaucratic review. Then we'd better make sure we pass, Adama replied. Because I'll be damned if we've come this far, survived this much, just to be found wanting by beings who judge willpower while sitting safe in their emerald citadel. The launch would begin in 6 hours. 12 Vipers, 12 colonial pilots, 12 Green Lanterns creating impossible deceptions. Against a command ship surrounded by adaptive defenses, protected by forces that learned from every engagement, positioned at the center of an enemy fleet that existed solely to exterminate organic life. Starbuck found Apollo in the pilot-ready room, both men checking their flight suits one final time. You know this is crazy, right? Even by our standards? Completely insane, Apollo agreed. But crazy's gotten us this far. Our might as well see it through to the end. Lords of Kobol willing, Starbuck said, touching the small medallion he wore beneath his flight suit, a survivor's talisman from the old Caprica. Lords of Kobol willing, Apollo echoed, and maybe a little help from some emerald ring slingers who think willpower can beat machine logic. Outside, space waited with its infinite darkness and impossible stars. The Cylons waited with their adaptive minds and genocidal programming. And somewhere in the cosmic void, the fate of two universes balanced on the edge of a knife, waiting for 12 colonial warriors to prove that courage and skill still mattered in an age of gods and machines. The launch bay hummed with controlled chaos as 12 Vipers prepared for what would likely be their final flight. Apollo ran through his pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision, his hands moving over familiar controls, while his mind wrestled with the cosmic absurdity of the situation. 24 hours ago, the most advanced beings he'd encountered were Cylon Centurions with their red scanning eyes and machine logic. Now he was coordinating with a Green Lantern named Orizia, a young woman from a planet he'd never heard of, who could fly through space on willpower alone and created constructs that defied every physical law Apollo had ever learned. Your fighter is admirably constructed for its technological level, Orizia said, her melodic voice carrying genuine appreciation as she examined the Viper. The design prioritizes maneuverability over raw power. Very wise against adaptive opponents. We learned early that you can't outgun the Cylons, Apollo replied, sealing his flight helmet. But you can outfly them. Machines calculate optimal trajectories. Humans improvise. That's what makes you dangerous, Orizia said, her ring glowing softly. Not your weapons or your ships, but your refusal to accept calculated defeat. The Guardians see it as chaos. I see it as beauty. Across the bay, Starbuck was having a markedly different interaction with his assigned lantern. A gruff, cat-like alien named Boudica, who looked like she'd rather be breaking skulls than babysitting primitive fighter craft. You will maintain radio silence throughout the approach, Boudica ordered, her feline features set in an expression of perpetual skepticism. You will follow my construct's trajectory exactly. You will not deviate, improvise, or attempt any of the foolish maneuvers I observed in your training exercises. So basically, fly like a machine, Starbuck replied cheerfully. That should be easy for someone who spent his whole life fighting against machine thinking. Boudica's eyes narrowed. Your sarcasm is noted and unappreciated. This mission requires precision, not personality. Good thing I've got both, Starbuck shot back, climbing into his cockpit with practiced ease. Try to keep up, Whiskers. Commander Adama walked through the launch bay one final time, stopping at each Viper to exchange words with pilots who'd become family through shared survival. Boomer, solid and reliable, who'd never lost his nerve even when the Cylons had massacred his entire squadron at the Battle of Simtar. Athena, brilliant and analytical, who'd proven herself equal to any male pilot despite the prejudices of older warriors. Sheba, daughter of Commander Kane, carrying the weight of her father's legendary reputation while forging her own path. Each one had a story, a reason for being here, a sacrifice they'd already made just by staying alive. Sir, Boomer said quietly as Adama approached his Viper. When we were running from the Cylons, I used to dream about finding allies. Other humans, maybe, or some advanced species that could help us fight back. But I never imagined. He gestured at the Green Lanterns positioning themselves throughout the bay. Beings who can reshape reality with their thoughts. And we're flying alongside them as equals. We're flying alongside them as warriors, Adama corrected gently. The power in their rings is impressive. But power doesn't win battles. Courage does. Skill does. The willingness to risk everything for something greater than yourself. That's what wins battles. And that's something you've demonstrated every day since the fall of the colonies. The tactical channel crackled to life, Hal Jordan's voice cutting through the pre-flight preparations. All strike craft, this is Emerald Leader. We've got Cylon movement on long-range scans. The base stars are repositioning. Looks like they're setting up for a run at Earth. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now, before they finish their preparation and we lose the tactical window. Galactica Actual, Adama replied, moving to the observation deck to coordinate from the command position. Strike team is weapons-free and prepared for launch. Execute operation on your mark. Copy that. Our commander. Jordan's transmission shifted to the broader tactical network connecting all Green Lanterns in the sector. All core personnel, this is 2814 Alpha. Operation Guardian Storm is go. Distraction elements, begin your approach. Strike team, stand by for masking construct activation. Through the Galactica's viewports, Apollo watched as the main Green Lantern force, nearly 200 lanterns pulled from neighboring sectors, began their assault on the Cylon defensive perimeter. It was like watching gods go to war. John Stewart created geometric structures the size of Battlestars, massive lattices of emerald energy that trapped entire squadrons of raiders in crushing vices. Kilowog manifested a battering ram that could have shattered planets, driving it into a base star's hull with the force of a dying star. Other lanterns, these species Apollo had never seen and couldn't name, wielded constructs that ranged from elegant to terrifying, swords that cut through hulls like paper, shields that reflected las fire back at its source, even massive hands that simply grabbed Cylon ships and crushed them like tin cans. The Cylons responded with adaptive efficiency. Raiders that had been destroyed in the first wave reformed their tactics in the second. Base stars that had been vulnerable to specific construct types reconfigured their defenses. The machine intelligence was learning, evolving, turning each defeat into tactical data for the next engagement. But the Green Lanterns were learning too. And more importantly, they were improvising. Strike team, this is your window, Jordan transmitted. Masking constructs active. You maintain formation within construct boundaries and the Cylons won't detect your energy signatures. Good hunting. Apollo felt his Viper lift off the deck, not from his own thrust, but from Arisia's emerald energy gently cradling the fighter. Around him, 11 other Vipers rose in perfect synchronization, each enclosed in a construct that made them invisible to Cylon sensors. The sensation was disconcerting. Flying without actually piloting, trusting alien technology to navigate through a battlefield where any mistake meant death. Relax, Apollo, Arisia's voice came through on a private channel. I can feel your tension. The construct responds to my will, not your anxiety. Trust me to get you where you need to go. It's not distrust, Apollo replied, forcing himself to loosen his grip on the flight controls. It's habit. Colonial warriors are trained to rely on ourselves, our ships, our training. Trusting someone else with control, even someone who can fly through space, goes against every instinct. Then consider it training for a new kind of warfare, Arisia suggested. One where cooperation matters more than individual capability. The strike formation slipped through the chaos of the main engagement like shadows through firelight. The Cylon sensors tracked the masking constructs, analyzed their energy signatures, calculated optimal interception vectors, and completely missed the primitive spacecraft hidden within. Apollo watched Raider formations streak past, so close he could see their red scanning sensors, yet none of them registered his Viper as a threat. Approaching command ship defensive perimeter, John Stewart's calm voice reported. Detecting increased energy signatures. The ship knows something's wrong. Its tactical computers are probably flagging anomalous construct behavior. Then we're out of time for subtlety, Jordan replied. Strike team, prepare for construct dissolution on my mark. When those masking fields drop, you'll have approximately 90 seconds before Cylon defenses adapt to your presence. Make them count. Mark. The emerald constructs vanished as if they'd never existed, and suddenly Apollo was flying on his own power again, his Viper's engines roaring to life as he punched the throttle to maximum. Around him, 12 colonial fighters emerged from invisibility like hunters materializing from shadows, their weapons hot, their pilots focused on a single target, the sleek command ship that hung in space like a metallic predator. And for 3 precious seconds, the Cylon's adaptive systems hesitated, confused by the sudden appearance of technologically inferior craft that shouldn't have penetrated their perimeter. Those 3 seconds were all Apollo needed. "All Vipers, target the communications array," he ordered, his targeting computer locking onto the cluster of antenna-like structures protruding from the command ship's hull. "Concentrate fire, sequential strikes. Don't give them time to adapt defenses." 12 Vipers opened fire in perfect synchronization, their last cannons stitching emerald and crimson death across the command ship's hull. The first volley took the Cylons by surprise. The ship's adaptive armor had been configured to resist Green Lantern energy constructs, not conventional colonial weapons. So explosions rippled across the communications array as ancient colonial technology proved that sometimes the old ways were still the deadliest. Then the raiders came. They emerged from concealed positions along the command ship's hull, dozens of them, their targeting computers already compensating for the Viper's attack vectors. Apollo threw his fighter into a hard bank, relying on instinct and training as Laz fire turned space around him into a death trap. Beside him, Starbuck's Viper danced through the barrage with the kind of reckless skill that had kept him alive through 100 impossible battles. "They're adapting," Athena's voice cut through the tactical channel. "Raider formations shifting to colonial counter-tactics. They're pulling maneuvers from our own playbook." "Then we give them something that's not in the playbook," Starbuck replied, cutting his engines entirely and letting momentum carry him forward while raiders overshot, their targeting computers confused by a maneuver that made no tactical sense. He rotated his Viper 90 degrees, fired a burst that destroyed 2 raiders, then reignited his engines and dove toward the command ship's hull. "Apollo, the central processing core should be near the ship's center mass. We need to punch through the hull and hit it from inside." "Are you insane?" Boudica's voice roared across the channel. "Your fighters don't have the firepower to penetrate capital ship armor." "Maybe not alone," Apollo replied, seeing what Starbuck was suggesting. But with a little help from our Green Lantern friends." He didn't have to finish the sentence. Arisia understood immediately. Her ring flared, and a massive drill construct materialized, spinning, diamond-hard, powered by willpower that could shatter stars. She drove it into the command ship's hull while Apollo and 3 other Vipers poured las fire into the breach point, superheating the metal, creating stress fractures that the construct could exploit. The armor gave way with a shriek that transmitted through vacuum as vibration, and suddenly there was a hole in the Cylon command ship large enough for Vipers to enter. "All strike craft, follow me in," Apollo ordered, diving his fighter through the breach before his rational mind could list all the reasons this was suicide. Behind him, 11 other Vipers followed, colonial warriors trusting their wing leader into the mechanical bowels of an enemy vessel designed specifically to kill them. Inside the command ship, reality became a nightmare of narrow corridors, automated defenses, and the red glow of Cylon processors analyzing every micron of their intrusion. Apollo flew by pure instinct, dodging defense turrets that tracked faster than thought, weaving through maintenance passages never meant for starfighters, following energy signatures that his targeting computer interpreted as the central processing core. And somewhere in the chaos, he realized they were actually going to make it. They were going to reach the core, deliver their payload, and destroy the Cylon command intelligence before it could adapt. Then the corridor ahead sealed shut. Not with a door or barrier, but with Cylon Centurions, dozens of them, appearing from access hatches, their red sensors fixed on the incoming Vipers, their weapons rising with machine precision. "Frack," Starbuck transmitted succinctly. They adapted. Apollo's targeting computer screamed warnings as 40 Cylon Centurions opened fire simultaneously, las blasts converging on the narrow corridor with mathematical precision designed to create an inescapable kill box. "Break formation!" he shouted, throwing his Viper into a 90-degree roll that scraped his starboard wing against the corridor wall. Sparks flew, alarms shrieked, but the maneuver saved his life as deadly energy passed through the space his fighter had occupied a microsecond before. Behind him, he heard Boomer grunt in pain as a blast clipped his wing. or sending his Viper into an uncontrolled spin that only years of combat experience allowed him to recover from. "We can't fight them in here," Athena transmitted, her voice tight with controlled panic. "The corridor's too narrow for evasive maneuvers and there's too many of them." "We don't have to fight them," Starbuck replied, and Apollo could hear the dangerous edge in his friend's voice that meant he'd just thought of something spectacularly reckless. "Sheba, you still carrying those high-yield charges we loaded for hull penetration?" "Affirmative," Sheba responded immediately, her fighter weaving between last blasts with precision that would have made her father proud. "But if we detonate them in this corridor, the blast will vaporize the Centurions and probably blow a hole through the next 3 bulkheads," Starbuck finished. "Which is exactly what we need. Apollo, tell me the central processing core is somewhere past these chrome nightmares." Apollo checked his navigation readout, comparing the energy signatures to the schematic John Stewart had helped them construct. "It's there, approximately 60 metrons beyond the Centurion position. But Starbuck, if we blow the charges and the blast penetrates that far, then we'll save ourselves the trouble of finding a door," Starbuck interrupted. "All Vipers, emergency reverse thrust on my mark. We're going to let physics do our fighting for us." In the precious seconds they had before the Cylons' adaptive targeting compensated for their evasive maneuvers, Apollo understood Starbuck's plan. Insane, dangerous, perfectly calibrated to the kind of desperate improvisation that had kept colonial warriors alive when all logical tactics failed. They couldn't fight through the Centurions. They couldn't retreat without abandoning the mission. So they were going to use the Cylons' own defensive position against them by turning the corridor into a blast furnace. "Mark," Starbuck transmitted. 12 Vipers fired reverse thrust simultaneously, rocketing backward through the corridor they'd just traversed while Sheba's fighter launched every high-yield penetration charge it carried directly into the Centurion formation. The Cylon sensors detected the projectiles. Their tactical computers calculated threat levels. Their adaptive protocols began formulating optimal response. The charges detonated before they could finish the calculation. Apollo felt the shockwave hit his Viper like the fist of an angry god, slamming him back in his acceleration couch hard enough to crack his flight helmet's faceplate. His instruments went haywire. His starboard engine flamed out. The corridor behind him became a hell of superheated plasma and vaporized metal as the blast ripped through Centurions, bulkheads, support structures, and anything else foolish enough to be in its path. When the firestorm cleared, the corridor was gone. In its place was a ragged tunnel of twisted metal leading directly into a chamber that pulsed with the distinctive red glow of Cylon processing equipment. "The core," Apollo managed, his voice raw from the G-forces. "We found the core." "Found it, breached it, and probably destabilized half the ship's structural integrity while we were at it," Starbuck replied, yet his Viper limping forward on one engine. "Definitely not how they teach it at the Academy." Outside the ship, the Green Lantern distraction force was being pressed to their limits. Hal Jordan created construct after construct. Fighters, missiles, even a massive battleship that fired emerald energy at Cylon base stars. But the Cylons had been analyzing his patterns for hours now. They knew he favored aerial combat constructs. They knew he thought like a test pilot, preferring speed and maneuverability over raw power. Every time he created a new construct, they adapted their defenses a fraction faster. "Jordan, your construct efficiency is dropping," John Stewart's voice cut through the tactical channel. "You're burning willpower faster than you're inflicting damage. Pull back and let someone else take point." "Can't do that," Jordan replied, now pouring more willpower into a construct cannon that was already flickering with instability. "The strike team needs every second we can buy them. If the Cylons redirect forces to the command ship before Apollo's team completes their mission..." A Cylon raider materialized from his blind spot, having learned to exploit the microsecond gaps in his construct shields when he shifted from defense to offense. Its last cannons fired point blank, and Jordan felt the impact as the green light around him shattered like glass. Pain, actual physical pain from energy that shouldn't be able to hurt him, lanced through his ribs as he tumbled through space, his ring struggling to compensate for damage it wasn't designed to heal. "Jordan's down!" Kilowog roared, abandoning his position to interpose himself between the fallen lantern and the follow-up attack. Sa, I got him, but we're losing containment on the defensive perimeter. The Cylons are breaking through. Inside the command ship, Apollo led his remaining Vipers into the processing core chamber, a vast space filled with towering columns of Cylon computational hardware, their surfaces covered in pulsing red lights that represented thoughts, calculations, the collected tactical knowledge of every engagement the machines had ever fought. At the center of it all sat something that looked almost organic, a sphere of crystalline material suspended in electromagnetic fields, fractal patterns of light dancing across its surface like trapped lightning. That's it, Athena breathed, her sensors confirming what her instincts already knew. The central intelligence. Not just a computer, it's the Cylons' collective consciousness made physical. Everything they've learned, every adaptation they've made, it's all stored in that matrix. Then we destroy it, Apollo said, lining up his targeting reticle on the sphere. Wait! Arisia's voice cut through his concentration. Her construct form materialized in the chamber, her expression troubled. Apollo, I'm reading something wrong with that sphere. The energy signature, it's not just processing data. It's connected to something else, something on the other side of the dimensional breach. Apollo's tactical computer began analyzing the energy patterns, and what it found made his blood run cold. It's a conduit. The sphere isn't just coordinating the Cylon forces in this universe. It's maintaining a connection to the Cylon forces in our home universe. If we destroy it, the breach collapses, Arisia finished. Cutting off the Cylons here from reinforcements, but also cutting off any possibility of you returning home. For a long moment, Apollo sat in his cockpit, hand hovering over the firing control, facing a choice that transcended tactical calculations. Behind him, 11 other colonial pilots waited, their weapons armed, their courage unquestioned, their trust in his leadership absolute. Outside, Green Lanterns were dying to buy them this moment. On Earth, billions of innocent humans who'd never heard of the colonies or the Cylons were going about their lives, unaware that their continued existence balanced on a trigger that a young pilot from a dead civilization was about to pull. Father, Apollo transmitted on a private channel back to the Galactica. The mission objective has changed. Destroying the core means we can never go home. The fleet will be stranded in this universe permanently. I'm requesting, I need to know if I have authorization to make that call. Adama's response came without hesitation. Apollo, I trained you to be a warrior, not just a pilot. Warriors don't ask permission to do what's necessary. They make the hard choices and live with the consequences. So I'm not going to give you an order. I'm going to tell you what I see. I see Earth, a world full of humans who deserve the same chance at survival we've been fighting for. I see the Cylons, who will never stop, never negotiate, never show mercy until every organic being in every universe is extinct. And I see my son, who has to decide if his people's past matters more than humanity's future. Apollo closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw them all. Caprica burning. Near the colonies falling. Children crying for parents who would never answer. The long, desperate flight through the stars, always running, never resting, slowly dying by degrees as hope eroded like sand in a storm. That was the past. Terrible, tragic, irretrievable. But there was also the present. The colonial fleet, battered but unbroken. 67,000 survivors who'd refused to surrender, even when surrender seemed like mercy. Green Lanterns who'd welcomed them despite the risk, fought beside them despite the consequences. And somewhere ahead, in the unwritten future, perhaps a chance to be more than refugees. To be protectors. To find purpose in defending others from the nightmare that had consumed their own civilization. All strike craft, Apollo transmitted, his voice steady with the kind of certainty that came only from making peace with impossible choices. Target the central sphere. Concentrate all fire. On my mark, we end this war. At least the part of it that threatens this universe. And if the Lords of Kobol are listening, I hope they understand why we're choosing to save strangers instead of going home. Apollo, Starbuck said quietly on the private channel. You know I'll follow you anywhere, right? Even if anywhere means never seeing Caprica again. Even if it means we're stuck in this crazy universe of flying gods forever. I know, Apollo replied. That's what makes this bearable. We're choosing together. He lined up the shot one final time. Outside, He could hear Hal Jordan rallying despite his injuries, Kilowog roaring defiance at overwhelming odds, John Stewart creating structures of impossible beauty to hold back the tide of machine logic. He could hear his father's steady breathing on the comm, Colonel Ty coordinating defensive positions, the prayers of civilians who'd placed their faith in warriors to keep them alive one more day. And in the crystalline sphere before him, he could see patterns of light that represented every Cylon adaptation, every lesson learned from slaughter, every calculation designed to make organic extinction more efficient. That sphere was genocide given form, connected across dimensional boundaries to ensure that no version of humanity, in no universe, could ever truly escape. For the colonies, Apollo whispered, and for every human who will never have to face what we faced. Mark, he transmitted, fire. 12 Vipers unleashed everything they had. Last cannons designed to crack Battlestar hulls poured coherent energy into the crystalline sphere. High explosive missiles that could level cities converged on the electromagnetic suspension fields. And Arisia, understanding what had to be done, created a construct of pure, focused willpower. A spear of emerald light carrying the conviction of a Green Lantern who'd chosen conscience over protocol, and drove it through the sphere's heart. The explosion that followed wasn't just physical, it was dimensional, metaphysical, a rupture in the fabric of space-time itself as the connection between universes severed like a cut cord. Apollo felt it in his bones, in his soul, in the fundamental structure of his being. The sensation of doors closing, of paths vanishing, of choices becoming irrevocable. On the Galactica, every scanner that had been tracking the dimensional breach suddenly flatlined. The quantum instabilities that had pulled them across universes collapsed into normal space. The door to their home, to the 12 colonies, to the war they'd fled, to any possibility of return, slammed shut and locked behind them. They were stranded, permanently, irrevocably. And in that moment of absolute finality, Commander Adama felt something he hadn't experienced in Yarns. Relief. The Cylon command ship died with mathematical precision, its central intelligence shattered, its adaptive systems fragmenting into isolated processors that could no longer share data or coordinate responses. Apollo pulled his Viper through the expanding debris field, his instruments screaming proximity warnings as sections of hull plating tumbled past close enough to scrape his canopy. Behind him, the remaining 11 colonial fighters executed emergency egress maneuvers, weaving through the destruction with the kind of desperate skill that had become second nature after years of running battles. Sheba's Viper had lost its port stabilizer. Boomer was flying on backup power cells. Starbuck's cockpit showed a crack that shouldn't have been survivable but somehow was, because Starbuck had always been too stubborn to die when the universe expected it. All strike craft, this is Galactica actual. Adama's voice cut through the chaos with command authority that steadied nerves and focused minds. Report status. Strike leader to Galactica, Apollo replied, checking his tactical display to confirm all fighters were accounted for. Mission accomplished. Central intelligence destroyed. Dimensional breach collapsed. All strike craft survived, though we're going to need extensive repairs and medical attention. Requesting recovery vector. Vector transmitted, T's voice replaced Adama's. And Apollo, well done. All of you. Colonial warriors have faced impossible odds before, but what you just accomplished, destroying a Cylon command intelligence while flying inside its own ship, that's going to be legend material. Outside the dying command ship, the tactical situation was transforming in real time. The Cylon base stars, suddenly cut off from centralized coordination, began exhibiting the kind of confused behavior that came from autonomous systems trying to operate without higher direction. And individual raiders continued fighting, but their tactics became predictable, repetitive, locked into the last set of adaptive protocols they'd received before the command ship died. They were still dangerous. Machine precision and nuclear weapons ensured that. But they were no longer learning, no longer evolving with each engagement. The Green Lantern Corps, battered and exhausted but unbroken, recognized the shift immediately. All lanterns, this is Jordan. Hal's voice carried the raw edge of someone fighting through injury and pure willpower. The Cylons have lost adaptive capability. Standard containment protocols are now effective. establish perimeter formation, and begin systematic elimination of hostile forces. He'd leave no functional Cylon vessels operational. We can't risk them re-establishing command hierarchy. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. Green Lanterns who'd spent hours struggling against adaptive defenses now faced enemies locked into predictable patterns. Kilowog's constructs, which the Cylons had learned to disrupt, now crushed Battlestars like empty cans. John Stewart's geometric structures, which raiders had begun to navigate around, now trapped them in inescapable prisons. Even Hal Jordan, injured and operating at reduced capacity, created targeting constructs that picked off raiders with surgical precision. The Cylons, for the first time since arriving in this universe, experienced what they'd inflicted on countless organic civilizations: systematic, unstoppable defeat. On the Galactica's bridge, Iadama watched the battle's conclusion with the complex emotions of a commander who'd achieved victory at catastrophic cost. The Cylons were being destroyed. Earth was safe. The dimensional breach was sealed. By every tactical metric, the mission had succeeded beyond reasonable expectation. And yet, "Communications," he said quietly. "Open a channel to the entire fleet. It's time they knew what we've done." The channel opened, and Adama's voice reached every vessel, every corridor, every desperate soul who'd fled the colonies hoping someday to return home. "People of the fleet, this is Commander Adama. I won't soften what I'm about to tell you because you deserve the truth without political convenience or comfortable lies. The dimensional breach that brought us to this universe has been destroyed. The Cylons can no longer pursue us here. Our and Earth, this universe's Earth, is safe from the threat we accidentally brought. But that safety came at a price. We can never return to our universe. We can never go home." He paused, letting the weight of that reality settle, knowing that somewhere in the civilian fleet, people were weeping for worlds they'd lost twice, once to Cylon genocide and now to cosmic finality. "I know what some of you are thinking," Adama continued, "that we traded our past for someone else's future. That we should have found another way, kept the door open, preserved the possibility of return. And you're right to think that, right to mourn that choice. But I want you to understand why it was made. The Cylons weren't just following us, they were invading this entire universe. They'd already begun analyzing the inhabitants, thus calculating optimal extermination protocols, preparing to inflict on this cosmos the same genocide they inflicted on ours. If we hadn't closed the breach, billions of innocent humans on Earth would have faced the same nightmare we fled. And I refuse to let our survival come at the cost of other people's extinction." Through the viewport, he could see colonial Vipers limping back toward the Galactica's landing bays, their hulls scarred by battle, their pilots exhausted but alive. "The 12 colonies are gone. Our homeworlds are ashes. That past is dead, no matter which universe we inhabit. But we, the survivors, the warriors, the last remnants of our civilization, we're still here, still fighting, still choosing to protect life rather than mourn what we've lost. And in this universe, we found something I never expected: allies who fight beside us, powers that could have destroyed us but chose to help us, and a chance to be more than refugees." His voice hardened with conviction. "So yes, we're stranded. Yes, we can never return home, but we're also free. Free from running, free from fear, free from the constant calculation of which ship to sacrifice next, which civilian transport to abandon, which child to tell they're the last of their family. The Cylons can't follow us here. The war, at least our part in it, is over. And if the cost of that peace is accepting this universe as our new home, then by the Lords of Kobol, I say we've made a bargain worth keeping." The channel stayed open for a long moment, and Adama could hear the sound of his words echoing through ship corridors, meeting rooms, civilian quarters. Then, slowly, hesitantly, someone began to cheer, and another, until the entire fleet, 67,000 survivors who'd carried grief and fear for so long they'd forgotten what hope sounded like, erupted in a cacophony of relief, joy, and hard-won acceptance. They were home. Not the home they'd left, but perhaps the home they'd been searching for all along. The Guardians materialized on the Galactica's bridge without warning, their ancient presence cutting through the celebration like a blade through fabric. Adama straightened, military bearing automatically reasserting itself, preparing for judgment from beings who measured civilizations against cosmic scales. Commander Adama, the lead guardian stated, you and your forces have demonstrated capabilities inconsistent with initial threat assessment. You destroyed a Cylon command intelligence, collapsed a dimensional breach, and cooperated effectively with Green Lantern Corps personnel despite minimal technological compatibility. Analysis requires revision. Is that Guardian speak for "we were wrong about you"? Colonel Tai muttered quietly. The Guardian's expression didn't change, but Adama could have sworn he detected the faintest hint of something that might have been amusement. It is Guardian speak for further evaluation necessary. However, preliminary conclusions suggest Colonial Fleet represents potential asset rather than liability. The question now becomes, what role will you occupy in this universe? Before Adama could respond, Hal Jordan limped onto the bridge, his uniform scorched, his ribs clearly broken despite the green light working to heal him, his face carrying the kind of exhausted satisfaction that came from surviving the impossible. Behind him came Kilowog, John Stewart, Arisia, and 24 other Green Lanterns who'd fought beside colonial warriors and lived to tell the tale. I can answer that question, Jordan said, addressing the Guardians with the kind of barely respectful defiance that suggested he'd already been reprimanded once today and wasn't particularly worried about a second offense. The Colonial Fleet stays in Sector 2814 under Green Lantern Corps protection. They've proven themselves as allies, as warriors, and as beings who value life enough to sacrifice their own chance at returning home to protect strangers. That's the kind of willpower we should be recruiting, not rejecting. Green Lantern Jordan, a Guardian replied with infinite patience. Your emotional investment in this situation is noted. However, recruitment decisions require more comprehensive evaluation than battlefield performance. The colonial survivors possess technological capabilities insufficient for standard Corps operations. Their psychology demonstrates warrior conditioning that may not align with peacekeeping mandates. Their courage saved this sector, Kilowog interrupted, his massive form stepping forward with surprising gentleness. Their pilots flew into a Cylon command ship with nothing but primitive las cannons and guts made of pure titanium. I've trained lanterns for centuries, and I ain't never seen rookies handle pressure like that. So if the question is whether they deserve sanctuary, the answer's yes. And if the question is whether some of them deserve rings. He looked directly at Apollo, who was just emerging from his Viper in the landing bay below. I'd test the young one myself. The bridge fell silent. A Guardian suggesting evaluation was one thing. A veteran lantern offering personal sponsorship was something else entirely. A recognition that transcended protocol and touched on the Corps' fundamental purpose. The proposal has merit, the lead Guardian acknowledged. However, such decisions require time, observation, integration protocols. For the immediate future, the Colonial Fleet will remain in Sector 2814 orbit under provisional asylum status. Commander Adama will coordinate with Green Lantern forces regarding long-term settlement options. The individual colonists who demonstrate appropriate psychological profiles may be evaluated for Corps recruitment, though such evaluation carries no guarantees. It wasn't a ringing endorsement. It wasn't even particularly warm, but it was acceptance, official, cosmic, irrevocable. The Colonial Fleet had a place in this universe, protected by the same beings who'd nearly expelled them days before. Thank you, Adama said simply, the two words carrying the weight of 67,000 grateful souls. In the landing bay, Apollo climbed out of his battered Viper to find Arisia waiting, her ring glowing softly in the artificial light. That was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed, she said quietly. Choosing to destroy your only way home to save people you'd never met. That's not just willpower, or that's wisdom. It was the only choice that made sense, Apollo replied, removing his cracked flight helmet. The Cylons took everything from us once. I wasn't going to let them do it to someone else. The Guardians are discussing potential recruitment, Arisia continued. Kilowog's already advocated for you specifically. If you were offered a ring, if you could wield that kind of power, would you accept? Apollo looked down at his hands. Pilot's hands, scarred and calloused from years of desperate combat, trained to fly fighters and fire weapons and make split-second decisions that meant life or death. Could those hands wield cosmic power? Could a warrior raised in humanity's twilight carry the light that protected the universe? I don't know, he admitted. Right now, all I want is to see my father, check on my pilots, and maybe sleep for about 3 days straight. Ask me again when I'm not running on adrenaline and the fading terror of having just blown up a Cylon brain while flying inside its skull. Arisia laughed, a sound like bells, unexpected and beautiful. Fair enough. The offer will stand. But Apollo, thank you. For trusting us enough to fight beside us. For being willing to sacrifice your past for our future. That kind of character is rare, even among lanterns. Across the landing bay, Starbuck was regaling Boudica with a dramatically embellished account of the mission that somehow made his role both more heroic and more ridiculous than reality. The cat-like lantern looked torn between annoyance and grudging admiration, which Starbuck clearly interpreted as complete success. On the bridge, the Guardians vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared, leaving Adama alone with his senior officers and Hal Jordan. So, Jordan said, conjuring a construct chair and collapsing into it with a pained grunt. Welcome to the neighborhood, Commander. You've got a lot to learn about this universe. The good parts, the bad parts, and the cosmically weird parts that don't fit either category. But for what it's worth, I'm glad you're staying. Sector 2814 could use a few warriors who actually understand sacrifice. We're refugees who accidentally brought a machine apocalypse to your doorstep, Adama replied. I'm not sure that qualifies us for gratitude. You're survivors who closed the door on that apocalypse permanently, knowing it meant you could never go home, Jordan corrected. In my book, that qualifies you for whatever you need. And speaking of which, Earth, the planet you've been searching for. It's about 3 light years from here. Would you like coordinates? Adama felt something catch in his throat. Earth, the 13th colony. The promised sanctuary that the sacred scrolls had spoken of, that generations of colonial explorers had sought, that had sustained hope through yarns of running and dying. It was real. It was here. And they were finally, impossibly, close enough to reach it. Yes, he said, but not today. Today my people need to rest, to grieve what we've lost and to accept what we've become. Tomorrow, he smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd worn since before the Cylons destroyed the colonies. Tomorrow we can start planning our future instead of running from our past. In the medical bay, pilots who'd survived impossible odds were being treated for injuries that should have been fatal, but somehow weren't. In the civilian fleet, families were gathering to mourn the final loss of their homeworlds while simultaneously celebrating liberation from fear. In the corridors of the Galactica, warriors who'd forgotten how to hope were rediscovering that lost skill one tentative smile at a time. And in the void beyond, the last fragments of Cylon base stars drifted as silent monuments to a war that had finally, mercifully, ended. The Cylons that remained, raiders without direction, isolated processors without network connection, would be systematically eliminated by the Green Lantern Corps over the coming weeks. The threat was contained, the invasion repelled. Humanity, at least this universe's version of it, would continue. See, Commander Adama stood at the viewport, looking out at stars that would never be truly familiar, but might someday feel like home. Behind him, his son returned from the landing bay, his flight suit stained with combat and his eyes carrying the weight of impossible choices made and accepted. Father, Apollo said quietly, did we do the right thing? Adama put a hand on his son's shoulder, father and warrior and commander, all speaking with single voice. We did the necessary thing. We protected the innocent, defeated the enemy, and chose life over nostalgia. Whether that's right by some cosmic standard, I don't know. But it's who we are. It's who we've always been. Colonial warriors who fight for humanity's survival, no matter which universe we find ourselves in. In the distance, an Earth hung in space like a blue-green promise. A world that didn't know them, protected by powers they were only beginning to understand, in a universe that operated by rules they'd spend years learning. But it was a world without Cylons hunting it, without genocide waiting in the shadows, without the constant calculation of which lives to sacrifice for another day of survival. It was, in the most important sense, exactly what they'd been searching for all along. The colonial fleet's arrival at Oe had been an accident, a desperate FTL jump that tore through dimensional barriers and brought refugees from one dying universe into the ordered cosmos protected by the Green Lantern Corps. The Guardians had seen them as anomalies, potential threats, variables that disrupted 3 billion years of carefully maintained universal stability. But in the crucible of combat against an enemy that existed solely to exterminate organic life, something remarkable had emerged. Colonial warriors, armed with nothing but primitive technology and unbreakable will, had fought alongside beings who could reshape reality with their thoughts. They'd closed the door to their home universe permanently to protect strangers from genocide. They'd proven that courage transcended technology, that willpower needed no ring to be absolute, and that sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when to let go of the past. Commander Adama would spend the coming weeks negotiating with the Guardians about settlement rights, resource allocation, and the colonial fleet's role in this new universe. Apollo would be tested for a Green Lantern ring, a test Kilowog suspected he'd pass, though whether the young warrior would accept the responsibility remained to be seen. Starbuck would continue being Starbuck, somehow managing to charm alien species despite cultural barriers that should have made it impossible. And Earth, the real Earth, this universe's cradle of humanity, would eventually learn about the cousins from another dimension who'd sacrificed everything to protect them from a threat they'd never seen coming. How they'd react, what role the colonials would play in this universe's human civilization remained to be written. But for the first time in Yarans, the survivors of the 12 colonies could think about the future without calculating survival odds or planning escape routes. The Cylons were gone. The running was over. And in the emerald light of Oa, I reflected in the eyes of warriors who'd refused to surrender even when surrender seemed like mercy. Hope burned brighter than it had since the fall of Caprica. The Green Lantern Corps had gained unexpected allies. The colonial fleet had found unexpected sanctuary. And the universe itself had learned that willpower came in many forms, some wielded through rings of cosmic power, and some carried in the hearts of people who'd lost everything but still chose to fight for others. In the Book of Oa, where the Guardians recorded significant events across cosmic history, a new entry appeared. The colonial refugees arrived through dimensional breach, destroyed Cylon invasion force, demonstrated willpower sufficient to sacrifice personal salvation for universal protection. Status: provisional allies. Potential: unlimited. It was clinical, precise, but emotionally neutral, exactly what one would expect from ancient beings who'd witnessed civilizations rise and fall like tides. But in the unofficial logs that Green Lanterns kept among themselves, Hal Jordan wrote something different. Met some humans from another universe today. They fly ships held together with hope and spare parts. They've lost everything but haven't lost themselves. Reminded me why we wear these rings in the first place. Welcome to the Corps' neighborhood, Colonial Fleet. You're going to fit in just fine.